Well, welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. It looks like there's chaos in Europe. The Prime Minister of Italy resigned because an initiative he was pushing didn't go through. They say the populists were against him. And it looks like the euro, which was trading at one time 135, 136 to the dollar, is almost down to parity now. Europe is in some chaos, and it looks like the whole union is starting to break apart. The Brits took their chips and went home. The question is, who else goes under or who else leaves? But that's something that we're going to be watching. And the president has been, I think, very courageous. If nothing else, he took a call from the head of Taiwan. And Taiwan has been a faithful friend of the United States for years. And yet all the media is just screaming bloody murder. How could anybody be so stupid as to take a call from the president of Taiwan? I've been to Taiwan. We've had wonderful meetings in Taiwan. They're wonderful people, and they have a very prosperous economy. But mainland China wants to take them over, and they say there's the one China. And so the question is, who owns it? Is Taiwan, is that the Republic of China, or the others called the People's Republic of China? So anyhow. That's in the works. But President-elect Donald Trump is filling up his cabinet. Ben Carson, our good friend, has now said, I will take on the job as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, along with that general known as James Mad Dog Mattis. He's going to be Secretary of Defense. But Donald still hasn't found a Secretary of State that he's comfortable with. Terry?
Well, Trump is also sticking with his strong campaign stance against American businesses leaving the United States. Jennifer Wishon has the story.
This weekend, President-elect Donald Trump kept his Twitter account hot, promising a 35% tax at the border on companies that fire their employees to manufacture products overseas, then sell them back into the U.S. That promise followed Trump's groundbreaking phone conversation with Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen, becoming the first American president or president-elect to speak with a Taiwanese leader since 1979.
It's a little mystifying to me that President Obama can reach out to a murdering dictator in Cuba in the last year and be hailed as a hero for doing it. And President-elect Donald Trump takes a courtesy call from a democratically elected leader in Taiwan, and it's become something of a controversy.
And speaking of diplomacy, Trump is expanding his search for contenders to fill the position of Secretary of State.
This week we'll have additional interviews with other candidates for Secretary of State.
That's in addition to the already long short list, including Mitt Romney, Rudy Giuliani, General David Petraeus, Senator Bob Corker, and John Bolton. And today, the Trump team announced the president-elect chooses former rival-turned-advisor, Dr. Ben Carson, as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Also today, a formal announcement that Trump is appointing retired General James Mattis to be his Secretary of Defense, known to many by his nicknames Mad Dog and Warrior Monk.
He speaks his mind. He's very colorful when he speaks. He's a dynamic leader that the troops just love. They're inspired by him.
In 2013, President Obama relieved General Mattis of his post at Central Command. The two reportedly disagreed over policy towards Iran. Mattis has called the Islamic Republic the single most enduring threat to stability in the Middle East. He's critical of the Iran nuclear deal and says America must prepare for the worst.
He is not in this delusional position of the Obama administration that the Iranians are people we can really deal with. They're not. They are our adversaries.
Bucci says Mattis is the right man to rebuild the military and focus on defense instead of the types of social experimentation that's occurred under the current administration. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the White House.
Well, with us now from Washington is our CBN News political correspondent, David Brody. David, you called that Mattis thing some time ago. What was your inside take on it, and how did you get it?
Well, Pat, you got the sense that Mattis is very simpatico with Donald Trump on numerous issues. It's not just about the issues, though. It really is the temperament and the mentality, if you will. You know, in other words, Donald Trump likes straight shooters. He likes truth tellers. That's what James Mattis is. I don't think there's any question about it. And if you look at some of Donald Trump's picks, I mean, look at Michael Flynn, National Security Advisor, straight up truth teller. Jeff Sessions, Attorney General, politically incorrect, straight up truth teller. This seems to be the prism that Donald Trump is looking for overall. Now, obviously, he's going to pick and choose certain cabinet heads depending on what the actual job entails. But overall, he likes those truth tellers. And look, James Mattis, you know, I had a chance, actually, to moderate a panel with him at the USGLC almost 3 years ago. The USGLC is the United States Global Leadership Coalition. As a matter of fact, I was on stage with James Mattis and Senator Tim Kaine, which was an interesting pairing. And, you know, Mattis is a lot more complicated than just this mad dog label we hear so much about. You know, we hear a lot about his truth-telling and how he's had some provocative statements and he riles up the troops and he's a wonderful general, all true. But he also knows that development, diplomacy, very, very important with working with other nations, and that was some of our conversation during that 3 years ago. So, you know, he's not just this mad dog that everybody talks about in terms of him being this type A, you know, let's go to war all the time. It's more complicated than that.
All right, Secretary of State, boy, there's been a parade of very competent people coming through. But apparently, Trump hasn't found anybody he's really simpatico, I guess is the word with. What do you hear from the insider? Do you hear anything?
Well, they're being very tight-lipped, but I will say this. Donald Trump likes to play the game a little bit. I mean, you know, he likes, look, we saw the visual of Mitt Romney and Donald Trump having dinner a week or so ago, and the cameras were there. He loves this. This is like Celebrity Apprentice on steroids for Donald Trump. I mean, he enjoys this, Pat. And so he'll let this nomination go a little longer. We understand it'll be either this week or maybe early next week, most likely. And why? Because it's the most high-profile job out there, and Donald Trump wants to string everybody along, especially the media. He loves to play with the media, and the media loves the parlor game here, and so I think that's part of it. But look, I think when it comes to Secretary of State, you know, we understand now there are a couple more candidates coming out, potentially. He met with John Bolton, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, last week. My spidey sense up again here, Pat, on John Bolton. Wouldn't be surprised if he potentially goes with Bolton. It would be a renegade pick. It would be not a traditional pick necessarily, but once again, if you filter it through the truth-telling prism, John Bolton and Donald Trump actually see eye to eye on quite a few things.
The thing of it is, it's a huge bureaucracy, and somebody's got to manage it. I mean, it has to do with enormous budgets and global stretch. So if he talks to Rex Tillerson, he's got a guy that's been running a major global company, so maybe that's what he's looking for. Well, our friend Ben Carson, by the way, who grew up in the projects in Detroit, has now been given the job of funding a lot of projects. What do you know about that?
Well, I think this seems to be the perfect fit for Ben Carson. A lot of people would say, well, what about HHS, you know, Health and Human Services Secretary, or Department of Education, because education and health are very important to him. But if you look at HUD, the Housing Urban Development, I mean, it really does combine education and health care within those inner cities that he's going to be tasked with developing in a more prudent and effective way. And I think it makes perfect sense for Donald Trump to tap Ben Carson because he can take both of those spheres of influence that he has and the expertise and bring him in desperately into the inner cities that need them here in America. So, you know, I think it's somewhat of a no-brainer pick. And once again, we're seeing loyalty be very important for Donald Trump. Jeff Sessions was loyal. He's now going to be Attorney General. Ben Carson, loyal from the beginning, or at least after he ended his presidential run, and now we see him being rewarded as well.
Well, you know, I heard Bill Bennett the other day talking about this being one of the most powerful cabinets that he can remember, and he was in the cabinet on 2 jobs. Are conservatives happy with these people from what you've been hearing about?
Yeah, I think the word would be, or the phrase at least, would be over the moon. Absolutely. I mean, if you go down the list, look at HHS Secretary Tom Price. pro-life as can be. The pro-life community is ecstatic about Tom Price, and of course he's been a big critic of Obamacare right from the get-go. So you go down the list and you see Tom Price, by the way, Christian, Jeff Sessions wears his faith on his sleeve as well, Betsy DeVos as well, Education Secretary, strong Christian, and school choice is her big thing. So once again, you have the life issue, you have school choice, and we can go on and on about how Donald Trump seems to be pleasing many of the constituents, especially those evangelicals that gave him 81% in the presidential election in November.
Well, the left is going apoplectic, but really, if they stick with it and the Senate holds, and I think it will, I don't think any of those up for election senators are going to go too much off the reservation. All he needs is a majority. They did the nuclear option before him. Harry Reid set it up for him, and so they don't have to worry about that 30% threshold they used to have. It looks pretty good to get them through the Senate, don't you think?
I think so. And also, an important point to remember here, Pat, the name Chuck Schumer. Now, I know a lot of conservatives, go, or if I can use some Jewish lingo here, oi gewollt, when you hear about Chuck Schumer. But look, Donald Trump and Chuck Schumer have a relationship as it relates to New York, and they know each other, and they're a couple of New Yorkers, and you know the deal, Pat. Those New Yorkers, they know how to deal, and Chuck Schumer's ready to cut a deal. I don't think there's any question about that. And so, therefore, I think you're going to see Chuck Schumer, yes, he has to be dedicated, if you will, to the Democrat platform in public. But in private, I think you're going to see a lot more wheeling and dealing between those two than you would ever have seen between a Barack Obama and a Mitch McConnell.
Last question. How many of the Democrats are in play for this next election? There are quite a few that are in vulnerable districts. Can you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, you're talking about in 2018 for Senate Democrats. Yeah, it's over 15. I believe it's 16. It may be 18. I'll have to double check the figures. But the bottom line is Democrats are already admitting they're in a heap of trouble. These are their words, not Republicans' words. A heap of trouble in 2018 as it relates to midterm elections because they've got more open seats coming. Open seats, contested seats, if you will, in 2018 than Republicans did in 2016. So if Donald Trump plays his cards right with this 100 days, which will be critical, and if there is an actual momentum that can start rolling out of the gate early, well, then 2018 actually may go against type, which means typically a president loses seats in that midterm election. This may be the anomaly here.
Well, those vulnerable Democrats don't dare go against Trump. If they do, their fate is sealed. I mean, they're most of them in districts that he won handily, so it's going to be tough for him. Anyhow, well, David, thank you so much. Keep it up, buddy. We're going to count on you for some really insightful analysis as we go down the road.
Thanks, Pat.
Fascinating.
Isn't that interesting?
Fascinating.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Okay.